G'day, I'm Matt. This channel is called The Right Car and this is the Kia EV6 GT, and I think it could be the most convincing way to spend $100,000 on a new car in 2023. If you want a really fast EV, that's because this one is really fast. But there's a lot more to the EV6 range than just the GT model. I'm going to tell you all about it in this review, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please do hit like and subscribe. And if you have subscribed but haven't hit the bell, that'll keep you up to date whenever I upload a new review. There's plenty more coming. Like I said, this one here is the Kia EV6 GT, and it's bloody close to $100,000 before on-road costs. And that might seem expensive to you, but it's actually pretty good value when you consider what this thing can do. If you don't need an electric car that can do 0 to 100 in 3-point-something seconds, then you might want to check out the more affordable EV6 GT line versions. Now, there's an all-wheel drive version which still has plenty of power and torque, but it isn't necessarily as performance oriented as this car. And it's $12,000 less than this. And if you want an even more affordable alternative that still looks sporty with that GT line trim, then you can spend $20,000 less than this and get the rear wheel drive GT line. Now that version does have a lot less power and torque. It's a single motor rear wheel drive car, and that might not be right for some people. At the bottom of the range is the Air version. It's the entry-level model, costs a whole lot less money, and it's got the longest EV driving range of the entire EV6 lineup. So if you want the most value for money in terms of driving range, the base model is going to make a lot of sense for you. But I'd love to know which one you'd pick in the comments section below. And for me, it's no contest, GT. Some of the best alternatives to the Kia EV6 are also from Korea, including the Genesis GV60, which shares the same architecture as this car. And then there's also the Hyundai Ioniq 5. You can hit the link up there and watch my review of that car. It's definitely an interesting EV in terms of its body shape and style. And speaking of interesting shapes, check out my review of the Ioniq 6, which is also related to the EV6. Yeah, so there's a few options out of Korea if you are looking for an EV at this sort of price point. But if you're looking specifically at the EV6 GT grade, well, there's some bigger name rivals that you might also want to check out, including the Porsche Taycan, the Audi e-tron GT, and also the BMW i4 M50. All of those have sort of similar power and torque available and much higher price tags. So that's why I think the EV6 GT is probably the best performance EV that you can buy, unless maybe you're looking at a Tesla Model Y performance. I don't like the interior or exterior styling of that car as much as I like this one, but I can see why you might choose that car if it's the right car for you. The EV6 is not the biggest electric car out there, but it's not small either, about 4.7 meters long. So you need to make sure whether it's going to fit into your lifestyle or into your garage. And obviously it does have a very distinct sort of design and interesting curves and body lines to it as well. Not as curvy as an Ioniq 6, not as boxy as an Ioniq 5. So is it still a practical option for a family? Let's check out the boot. Before I open the boot, I just want to call out some of the finishes on the back of this car. I love this LED strip, and I love these little elements on the outer edges of the car. It just looks so fantastic, if you ask me. Now, let's talk about the boot. It's an EV, so it should have a pretty efficient boot size, right? Well, it's not too bad. 480 litres of cargo capacity is what you get in the back here, which is going to be enough for a family for maybe a weekend away, but not much longer than that because of the roof line. It actually slopes down quite a bit and eats into the space quite a bit as well. Now, like most electric cars, there's no spare tyre. You do get a tyre mobility kit, as you'll see right here. Under the boot floor, you'll find a place to store your charging cables, or maybe you'll put something like wet swimmers, because you could put that under there because there's a plastic cover under there as well. So that's pretty neat. Not too bad of a boot, not necessarily the best boot for this size of car, but I think it'd be usable for a family of 3, no doubt about that. The EV6 has an interesting interior. The EV6 GT has an amazing interior. This seat is one of the most comfortable, supportive sporty seats that I've sat in a production car at this sort of money. It's kind of like a Porsche seat. That's what it feels like to me. It's a really comfortable and supportive and sporty feeling and sporty looking seat too. I love this trim combo, this lime greenish accent, the microfiber on the inners. Definitely has a lot of grip to it, and it needs to have a fair bit of grip to it because this is a very quick car. I love also the finishes in this GT grade on the dashboard. There's this gradient sort of striping, which looks fantastic, I reckon. There's also the microfiber stuff on the doors and on the armrests as well. You've got a soft covered armrest here as well. And obviously, because it's an EV, it has the available space that you will need for storage. There's a massive storage tray underneath here. As you can see, it sort of has nothing where a traditional transmission would be. So there's an extra amount of storage down there, USB charger and a USB connector point for the screen. That's right, it's not wireless Apple CarPlay in the EV6. It's because it's got sat nav. So it is a little bit behind in that regard. There is a wireless phone charger though. You've got cup holders between the seats here as well. You've got a covered center armrest, which is massive as well. Big door pockets, and they're lined with this interesting felt-like material. And it definitely looks and feels like you're getting into something that is special. However, there are some things that are missing. Sure, you get a heated steering wheel and you get heated seats, but you don't get electric seat adjustment in this $100,000 Kia. You also don't get electric steering wheel adjustment. It's manual. So there are some elements of it that just don't feel as special as they could for 100 grand. Let's check out the back seat. Backseat space in the EV6 is very good apart from footroom. These seats do sit a little bit low, so yeah, my feet are sort of stuck there. I'll have to put them back a bit, and that means I'm in a bit more of a knees up position. You know, for leg room, there's heaps. This is set for me. I'm 182 centimeters or 6 foot tall. There's lots of room, obviously, but yeah, the usability of the room could be a little bit better. Now, in terms of headroom, it is a little bit limited on the outer edges, and you do have to watch your head getting in and out as well. Storage is okay. There are no map pockets on the GT spec, and you will find that also there's a pair of cup holders in this armrest, but that armrest sort of drops down quite a long way. It's not ideal. There's bottle holders in the doors too, and you might be wondering where the air vents are. They're not there. There's a couple of USB-C ports there, but the air vents are up in the pillars. So I actually find that that's typically a better air solution if you do have a little kid in a child seat, as I did in this car. There's ISOFIX points and 3 top tether points. She obviously had heaps of room in this car because there's a lot of leg room available. It's just that for adults, footroom could be a little bit limited. Pretty good though. All versions of the EV6 come with a 77.4 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, but the choice of either 1 or 2 electric motors. So that's the difference between rear wheel drive and all wheel drive. The entry level versions are rear wheel drive, and they have more modest power and torque outputs. You'll see them on your screen now. They are definitely geared towards a standard driver, someone who doesn't necessarily need the thrills, but just wants to get as many Ks out of their car as they can when they plug in overnight. Then there's the all-wheel drive versions, and the GT line all-wheel drive has a fairly sizable kick up the backside in terms of power and torque. 42% more power, 72% more torque than the single motor versions, and it definitely offers a more convincing power and torque output if you are after something that's a bit more enthusiast. But if you want the real enthusiast one, you get this car here. It's got 430 kilowatts and 740 Newton meters of torque, and that means that it can go from 0 to 100 in 3.5 seconds. I understand not everyone needs an EV that can go that fast, but if you want an EV that can go fast, this is amazing. Thought I'd also mention that you do get a little storage section under here. It's bigger in the rear wheel drive versions because there's no motor at the front axle. I've already made mention of the fact that this is a super duper fast and powerful car, but the beauty of electric cars like the EV6 is that they can be weapons when you need them to, or more sedate and more easy-going when you don't. And that's one of the attributes that I really like about the EV6, is that no matter which grade you choose, you do have a fair bit of performance on offer, maybe not in the rear-wheel drive versions, but in the all-wheel drive models, you got a fair bit of grunt, but it's also measured in the way that you can apply that grunt too. So I'm just cruising around, there's a little bit of traffic around, and it's a very easy car to live with in the sort of day-to-day drudgery that we all have to deal with. In the GT version, you are going to want to go and find a nice stretch of road and stretch the legs of this electric powertrain, because it is very, very, very good when it comes to the sportier side of driving. If you're not aware, Kia often does tuning on its models in Australia, and it doesn't have anything like the adaptive dampers or air suspension that some other cars have, but the tune of the suspension and the way that it steers is very good. Yes, this is the GT version, and yes, it does have a slightly stiffer ride to it than the other versions, but honestly, it's still entirely livable. I will say though that the steering can be a little bit heavy at lower speeds, and that can mean that if you're doing a 3 or 5 point turn in a tight street, that it can be a bit more of a tussle with the steering wheel than you might want it to be. But honestly, it doesn't really matter when the car is as good to live with as this car is. Yes, it is the performance version, but the ride is really comfortable. It's very easy to just drive this car and live with it on a day-to-day basis. Just on the freeway now, and as you can probably hear, there's quite a bit of tyre noise in the cabin of this car. I think you tend to notice it more in EVs than you do in traditional cars because, well, there's less other noise and less other vibration to contend with. So yeah, it isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but it is a little bit loud. That's better. Now, to unlock the huge potential of this powertrain, you need to hit the GT button on the steering wheel. That'll instantly free things up a little bit and allow you to make the most of this double motor powertrain. And it is very, 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 very fast. As soon as you do that, you do notice that on the screen, it'll tell you that your range has dropped because it knows that it's using more of the available power. And that'll also change when you're going between eco and normal modes as well, in the sport mode too. So that's pretty cool to be able to see that in real time, what your predicted range might be if you're driving in different modes. A lot of EVs offer that, and it does allow you to better restrain yourself if you might be a little bit far from home, for instance. And you might find yourself far from home in this car if you are looking for a good road, because it's deserving of one. It's a very, very convincing, sporty electric car. The entry-level version, the Air rear-wheel drive, has the longest driving range and is the most efficient version of this car in terms of kilowatt hours per 100 Ks of energy consumption. So that's kind of like what you consider when you're looking at a fuel label on a car and it says X litres per 100 Ks. Same sort of thing. The lower the number, the better. So the Air has the lowest number of all the EV6s. Then there's the rear-wheel drive GT line, which is slightly higher, but still very impressive. And then the all-wheel drive version of the GT line, which sees a bit of a bump up, and obviously it also has less EV driving range too. And then there's this one, which has an official figure of just over 20 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks, which, considering the amount of power and torque that it has, is not that bad. Look, you can get a Polestar or a Volvo with a dual motor layout with less power and torque that isn't as fast, and it's going to use 26 kilowatt hours per 100 Ks. So it is very efficient on paper. In the real world, you'll see my official test figure on your screen. Not really official, but it's just what I saw across a mix of different driving scenarios, including a few of those accelerations from 0 to 100, but maybe not for you to see. The EV6 is built on the same architecture as the Hyundai Ioniq and Genesis EV models, so it's got an 800 volt architecture, and that means that it is capable of up to 350 kilowatt fast charging. If you can find one of those chargers, then you'll be able to get this car from 10 to 80% in 18 minutes, according to Kia, which is very, very fast. Most EV chargers are more like 50 kilowatts, and you'll be looking at more like an hour and 15 minutes if that's what you end up charging at on a DC charge. When it comes to AC charging, there's a maximum AC rate of 11 kilowatts. If you happen to have one of those really fast home wall boxes, then it'll do it in about 7.5 hours, 10 to 100%. And if you have a 7 kilowatt wall box like I do at home, it's going to be closer to something like 12 hours, so an overnight charge. But that's not unusual. It's a pretty big battery in a pretty big car. The Kia EV6 scored the maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating in 2022, so it's got heaps of standard safety equipment, but there are some things that you need to know when it comes to the tech on offer in the different model grades. There's autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian, cyclist and junction detection, and rear AEB if you choose a GT line or GT grade version, but if you buy the base model, you miss out on rear AEB. Also, if you buy the base model, you're getting a reversing camera, but no surround view camera. All the other models get a surround view camera. Plus there's blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, and in the top versions, again, you get a camera-based system that shows up on the screen if there's something in your blind spot. You don't get that in the base model car, so you are missing out on a bit of safety tech if you are skimping on the entry-level version. That said, there are 7 airbags on the inside, including dual front side, curtain airbags and a front center airbag to stop head clashes in the event of a side impact. So it is pretty safe, just the base model might not hit all the targets for you. As with other Kia models, there's a 7-year unlimited kilometre warranty on offer in the EV6 range, and a 7-year 150,000 kilometre warranty for the battery pack, which is a bit shorter than some of the other rivals out there. It's got service intervals of every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, which is less than some of the other cars out there. Some have 24-month and 30,000 K intervals, but you can prepay your servicing if you choose. There's 3, 5 or 7-year plans available. Just note that the GT version costs a fair bit more if you want to buy one of those prepay service plans. Apparently it's because it's got a beefier braking system. I would be more than happy to have an EV6 in my driveway as a full-time resident, and I'd be even more happy if it was the GT version. This is an absolute weapon of an EV, far better than its price tag suggests it probably should be. And that's one of the reasons I think it's the bargain of the year so far, if you are looking for a fast EV that's also family friendly. Let me know in the comments section below, would you choose this or something else? Have you got a Kia EV6? I'd love to know what you think of it if you do own one, or if you own an Ioniq and you're jealous of this car. Let me know in the comments section. And if you haven't already, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Thanks, see you in the next one.